Hello, welcome back to my knitting podcast. So today is episode number 5, I believe, of my knitting podcast, and it's been a while since my last episode. It's actually been almost exactly a month, and I think I would like to keep my podcast at a monthly frequency. I think, because I used to say I would get a podcast out every 2 weeks, but I think that's just not realistic for me because I don't really knit that fast, and so I think I wouldn't have much to show you if I did it on a fortnightly basis. Whereas I think if it's once a month where I do like a recap, so today is going to be a recap of my June knitting, then I think there's more content to share, basically. So today, I've got my little list here. Today I've got one FO to share and 4 works in progress to talk about, as well as some future cast-on plans. So today I'm not wearing any knitted items because it was a bit too warm to basically wear my finished object, which is this one, my mixed rib camisole handmade by Florence. So this was a test knit that I did for Florence. It is my third test knit for Florence this year. I've been quite an avid fan of her latest patterns, so I've been signing up to her test knits, and I'm quite happy with those. So last time I shared this piece, I think I was about here, and I headed off to France to see my grandparents, and that's where I completed all the the I-cord edging, and I think I finished the body once I was back from France. So I finished this mid-June basically, and have worn it quite a few times since. So I actually put some footage of me wearing this top because it's really versatile top. I always said that I think I would really like the shape of this pattern, and I was very happy when it was done because it's very easy to match with jeans or like a skirt or something like that. Great summer garment. The only thing I'll say though is that Florence suggests a certain pickup rate for the I-cord for the neck edge, and some of the testers mentioned that they were finding it a bit too loose. So I did like a smaller rate of pickup for the I-cord, and I think I did it a bit too small. I've got the opposite problem where I think the I-cord is a bit too small. So what happened is that you can kind of see in the picture, instead of having the kind of cami arrive right at the edge of the shoulders, it's a bit more inward, which makes this top slightly less bra friendly than I hoped it would be. So like, imagine if this is the edge, then my bra strap might be just here. So I kind of if I tuck it in, it's fine. If I just kind of zhuzh up the bra straps and the shoulders for this top, then it's fine. But this is just one thing that if I wasn't feeling lazy, I would undo the I-cord and do like a slightly less restrictive pickup rate, so therefore loosen up the I-cord a little bit, or maybe go up a needle size. But it's like it's a fault that's like on my part, that's like minimal enough that I don't care enough to fix it. So this top didn't take me too much time to knit up. I think it took me about 6 weeks. That was the length of the test knit, and I pretty much did start to finish. So yeah, about 6 weeks to knit this top up. And the ribbing pattern, so these are like normal, knit stitches, and the rib here is twisted rib. And first I thought, ooh, that might actually like slow me down a little bit because I'm not too used to twisted rib. But actually, once you get the hang of it, it goes really fast. Like the pattern goes quite fast in your needles, and it became quite addictive. That's what we were saying with all the other test knitters on the group chat. So yeah, pretty quick to knit up. I'm considering making a second one, maybe, because I have some leftover Sadness Garn Sunday that I could use up for this. Although I think I would require an extra skein that I could purchase because I'm going to Oxford, yeah, very soon. So I could go to the Oxford yarn store to pick up that extra skein of yarn to make sure I have enough for another top. Yeah, actually, I'll probably do that. Yeah. So, yeah, speaking of Sadness Garn Sunday, so this is knitted up in Sadness Garn Sunday in the color 6050 Above the Clouds, and it's a really beautiful dusty light blue. So the Above the Clouds color is quite similar to one of the Knitting for Olive merino colorways called Dusty Duff Blue, I think. So it's a really beautiful dusty, well, Above the Clouds is a beautiful dusty blue. Really liking my blues lately. In fact, most of my winter knitting plans are with blue yarns that I've purchased over the last few months. So the yarn, I actually have planned a bit of a segment where I compare the Sadness Garn Sunday with Knitting for Olive merino as summer garments yarn. So I'm saying this because I've knit cami number 5 by My Favorite Things Knitwear using Knitting for Olive merino in the color marzipan, and I found that there's a bit of a difference in the feel of the yarn, of either yarn, and I wanted to talk about it. So from the label, it seems like these two yarns are quite comparable to each other, except the price. This is, I think, a couple pounds cheaper. Sadness Garn Sunday is a couple pounds cheaper than Knitting for Olive if you were to buy it from UK knitting shops. Now, I found that actually the Sadness Garn Sunday is a bit rougher than Knitting for Olive merino. And I thought that would be something interesting to note, because for those extra £2, you are, I think, getting a higher quality merino. Now, it might also be that I've worn this a fair bit more than this one, which is kind of only fresh off the needles by a couple weeks, and therefore it needs time to kind of like soften and just fuzz up a little bit, because I can see from this one that there's like definitely a bit more fuzz from wearing this top than this one. But also the ply of the yarn is a bit different. I think the Knitting for Olive merino is a bit rounder than Sadness Garn Sunday. I feel like I can see more separation in the plies of the Sunday than the Knitting for Olive merino. It's like they're more like, the thread is more round because the plies are more stuck together, whereas the Sunday you can kind of tell the ply separation. I don't know how much the camera will be able to pick up. But yeah, there's like these kind of small differences in texture and quality. Yeah, you can kind of tell that this is a lot smoother, I think, than this. Yeah. So I think this is a good thing to note. So like, if I'm not saying that, I'm not saying this as it's a bad thing. I've loved wearing this top. It's very nice against my skin, although there's a teeny tiny bit of roughness that you definitely don't get with the KF4 merino. So I think that's something to note. So if you're in a position where you're wondering if the extra couple pounds per skein is worth it for getting KF4 merino over the Sadness Garn Sunday, I would say yes, because you get that slightly higher quality merino thread with the KF4 merino. However, obviously the color selection is very different for either brands. While Knitting for Olive is quite known for its very muted colors, Sadness Garn Sunday has a lot of very like bright and colorful skeins. So yeah, I think those are like differences between the two yarns. I think on a jumper level, it might be different. I've knitted a sweater, well, the wrap cardigan, Maybole wrap, using Sandisk on Sunday held with a mohair, and like I didn't feel any of the like slight itch that I was feeling with this. And I'm wondering if that's gonna be the same with Knitting for Olive Merino paired with a mohair. So maybe if you're pairing it with something else, you might not see any difference in like these two yarns, but because here they're held single and they're like directly against your skin, maybe that's why, you know, the difference in quality is more apparent. Now, in terms of yarn quantity, for my size, which was the size B, the second size from the pattern, I used just over 2 skeins of yarn. So I had to dig into the third one quite a bit, I think, to get to the length that I wanted. Right. So now moving on to works in progress. I'm quite proud to show this one off today. So I think this project has like shown up in almost all of my knitting podcasts since I started this podcast back in March, I believe. And I'm very proud to say that I'm finally done with the body. I've been saying how this project has felt like such a pain in, it's been a journey, but in the previous podcast, this is the Cumulus tee by Petite Knit, and I'm knitting it up in Knitting for Olive Pure Silk in the color cream. So in the previous podcast episode, I've mentioned how I've switched knitting needles, and how that made a huge difference in the feel of like the knitting experience with this project. And that has meant that I feel like I've made quite a lot of progress, hence, you know, finishing the body and doing the I-cord finishing. So I switched from Addi metal needles that were like making the pure silk really squeak against the needles as I was knitting, to C-knit koshitsu needles, which are like the hard bamboo. And that has made like a world of a difference. Now, that doesn't mean to say I'm finishing this project quickly, because like I'm completely procrastinating on doing the arms, the sleeves. This is like this is why the knitting podcast is good, is because it makes you kind of pull up your projects and like have like, you know, a roundup and status update with them. And I think it's kind of making me realize I'm so close to finishing this project. I should just get on with it and pick up for the sleeves and just at least knit one sleeve tonight, maybe. And I feel like that will give me enough motivation to finish the whole thing, including, you know, the neck edge over the next few days. So yeah, super happy. I've roughly followed the guideline for the length of the t-shirt. So it's kind of hitting me. Yeah, it's hitting me past my hip bones, essentially, I think, which is like the perfect t-shirt length. I've compared it against some normal store-bought cotton t-shirts that I own, and yeah, it hits around the same length as those. So this has been neatly folded away while I work on more urgent stuff, such as the mixed rib cami, as well as, so my next work in progress, birthday socks for my partner. And it's quite urgent right now because his birthday is in a week and a bit, and I'm going away for a week, so this is going to be my traveling project. So this is knitted up in this wonderful West Yorkshire Spinners signature 4-ply that's self-striping. So it makes this really cute, 4 shades of blue, actually 5 shades of blue stripes. And I really like how like rough and rustic this sock feels. I've heard some really good reviews about West Yorkshire Spinners 4-ply for socks, notably from Florence's guide to sock knitting video. They're like, it was really cheap. It was like $7.50 a ball something, and you get like 100 grams, and it's enough to make adult male size socks, right? So I'm not particularly following any sort of patterns. This is just with just a vanilla sock with 72 stitches around, and a 2x2 rib for the cuff, and I did a fish lips kiss heel. Now, maybe not the best idea because it's a bit tight around my partner's ankle, apparently. But, oh, and I'm knitting this cuff down. But because I'm knitting with tiny needles, the small circular needles, which do make vanilla socks go by pretty quickly, it felt a bit, I tried doing like a heel flap and gusset using these, and it felt a bit difficult, so I just switched over to Fish Lips Kiss heel, which was much easier to do with tiny circulars. Now it's quite funny because I'm still trying to get used to tiny circulars, right? And for knitting, I could do it continental style at a pretty good pace. But for purling, I can't do continental style because I do Norwegian purl, which is when you've got, you need to do quite a bit of twisting and turning like this. There's a lot of hand movement when I'm doing my Norwegian purl, which is quite uncomfortable with tiny circulars. So essentially when I'm doing the ribbing and when I'm doing the wrong side of the heel, as I'm knitting up the heel, I have to go switch back to English style knitting, which is how I started knitting. So yeah, it's quite interesting. So all this cuff I did English style, and then from here I've picked back up to continental style knitting. So the socks do go quite, I did start these a while back, but when I get into the zone with these socks, it goes really fast. And I'm thinking I have a lot of hand-dyed yarn, hand-dyed sock yarn that I really need to use up. So I'm thinking that I'll always try to have some sort of socks on my tiny circulars. It's a good fidgeting knit, I think. I could do it without looking too much. So I can knit on this while I watch like series or movies. Sorry, my face is scratchy from like all the yarn fluff. So yeah, I'm thinking I should have tiny circular needles to knit socks. Like I should always have a sock project on these needles to basically use up my really beautiful hand-dyed sock yarn stash. It's from my subscription of Market Town Yarns. I get a hank of hand-dyed sock yarn every month with this subscription, and I haven't used them up very much. So yeah, I need to get started on knitting socks with these. So his birthday is in 10 days, but I'm traveling exclusively with this as my knitting project for my travels. So and I have a lot of train journeys during this trip. So I'm hoping that I'll finish the socks, the second sock, by the time it's my partner's birthday. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. So the next project I want to talk about is, so this is actually one of the things that I said I wanted to knit in my spring summer knitting plan, so that's quite nice. This is the mini mock neck tank, by Jessie Made Design. Looking good. Oh, I like how the color is quite different when it's hitting the sun, because I've been knitting on this in like the other side of the room, which is a bit darker, so I haven't been able to see the tonality of this hand-dyed yarn much. Very nice. So let's talk about the yarn first, because I have quite a bit to say about the pattern itself, so we'll get the yarn out of the way. So this is a good way to show off my this gift from my partner. This, before I talked about the yarn, this is 3D printed yarn spinner, yarn holder thing that my partner 3D printed for me. So it's really cool. He's got this, I don't know how to call it in English, but it's the thing to make the top spin without making the bottom spin. Yeah, just like any old yarn holder. So yeah, I've been using with these, super useful. And he put filled the bottom with rice and put some glue here to make sure that the bottom doesn't slide as I pull the yarn. So the yarn is the Fiber Fox. I don't know if the yarn has a name, but it's the yak silk sock yarn. Does it have any silk? No, I think I'm lying. I think it's a merino yak nylon blend. So the yak is giving it very nice drape and softness, but the nylon content still keeps it, I think it's meant to be a sock yarn essentially, right? And I think I like the idea of using sock yarns for tops, because for tops I want to make sure that they kind of maintain memory and resilience. So I feel like if I make a top out of sock yarn, it will be a bit more durable, basically. So this colorway, I don't even know what it's called. I don't think it had a name. Basically, it was one of the single hanks that were on sale when I went to East Anglia Yarn Festival. So the Fiber Fox had a stall there, and they had a bunch of single hanks that were on sale because they were probably the last of the batch or something, or last of die lot. So I picked this up at a pretty good, like I think a 20% discount from the original price. And sorry, I was just hit with iPhone has no storage message. Anyway, so what was I saying? So I did a gauge swatch with this yarn for the top, right? As I usually do. And I noticed that while I was hitting the stitch gauge, approximately, I was not nearly close enough to the row gauge. And I thought, it will probably be fine, and I'm not sure what you can do about it, you know, like you can't exactly change. I'm actually quite interested in knowing how people go on about fixing their row gauge. But then I had the issue of the pattern being all described in terms of rows instead of like length, until you reach a certain point where you then need to do something else. So typically, right, you might be told that you're knitting straight from the shoulder up to a certain point when you need to start increasing for your armhole. And that wasn't the case in the pattern. The pattern tells you a number of rows to knit before you do that. And the way it's described in the front, in terms of number of rows versus the back, is a bit different, because the front, you're mostly doing the neck shaping, and then pretty much immediately after the neck shaping is done, you have to do the armhole shaping without giving away too much. So it meant that I didn't really know where I could adjust my row gauge by knitting a few more rows before I start the different like shapings at the front and the back. So what I'm kind of realizing is that my armhole depth is quite a bit shorter than it should be, because my row gauge is smaller. Well, I have more rows per centimeters than Jessie made. So, but I did try the top on and it was absolutely fine. Like, it fits, you know, so that's not too much of an issue. It's just maybe really close, much more closer to my armpit than I probably would usually like. But I think with a bit of stretching while blocking and really just getting over myself about the fact that the armhole is a bit close to my armpit, it'll be fine. Like, I made sure it fits, and it does. So, this is going pretty quick. Sorry, this is a thread. This is actually going pretty quickly. Yeah, you can see how much I've done. And I only started this a week and a half ago. Actually, 2 weeks from now. And I'm already, you know, almost done with the body. I've got about 5 centimeters more to do before it reaches the length that's suggested. And then I'll give it another try before I commit to doing the body ribbing and binding off. And then because this pattern integrates the armhole edge within the main front and back knitting, you don't have to pick up sleeves to do the armhole edges. So that cuts down quite a bit of time. And so the only thing that you need to do once you bind off the body is pick up for the neck and do the neck edge to get that kind of mock neck look that the pattern goes for. So overall, pretty happy with this, the speed at which this pattern is going. It was also very easy to follow, despite, like my issues with my row gauge has nothing to do with the fact that the pattern was very legible, easy to follow. I was slightly confused at the shoulder construction at first, but after a bit of, figuring it out, it was absolutely fine. It's really interesting. It makes, instead of like doing increases to slope the shoulder at the back, you use short rows to shape it, the kind of back of the neck dipping a little bit compared to your shoulders. So yeah, super unique construction that I've never tried before. So that's also really fun. I'm knitting this up in 3.5mm needles as suggested by the pattern. So I think that's another reason why it's going pretty fast, even though it's like a fingering weight project. It's knitted up on 3.5mm needles as opposed to the usual 3mm needles. And I'm also using my new C-Knit bamboo needles, which I think are like so nice. They go so smoothly, and I've been able to knit on this without looking too much. So I knit on this while I read and while I watch movies, basically. So really excited about the mini mock neck tan, and possibly going to knit a few more. If I can figure out how to fix this row gauge issue by figuring out where I can add a bit of extra length for the armhole, then that will be ideal. But let's finish this one first and then we'll see. But yeah, pretty happy with this. And as I said, it was one of my plans for the spring summer knits 2024. So super happy that there's good progress on this. Now, the last work in progress that I'm going to talk about today is something that I've mentioned in my last knitting podcast as well. And it's the Moby sweater, which I know completely not seasonally appropriate. Wow. Oh, it actually looks so great on camera. Love that. Oh, I could tuck in some of the threads to make it look better. Yay! So, I think last time I showed this jumper to you, I was about here. Because I remember I've completed two cable turns since then, and I'm about to complete a third. So it's been going well, and I also added a neck, even though I'm gonna have to pick it off because I don't know if you can tell, but my neck is the rib is a bit slanted because I've made the mistake of when doing the fold not picking up perfectly aligned, and therefore my rib is a bit slanted to one side because I didn't align it properly. And I've done quite a few folded necklines in the past year, and I was always like, haha, I've never done the mistake before, because I see other people doing it and I'm like, yay, hasn't happened to me. It has. So I'm gonna have to undo this neck and start again. Well, not completely, right? Because it's this folding technique where you're binding off as you're folding. So I'll just have to undo the bind off and then pick up from, I can tell where I've made the mistake. So pick up from where I've made my mistake and just continue binding off correctly. So I think I've mentioned that I wanted to maybe do a summer cowl for the Moby sweater. And I think once I'm done with my partner's socks, I'll put out a more official post on Instagram saying we're going to do like a mini cowl of people who want to get as much progress as possible on their Moby or finish their Moby over the summer ahead of autumn and winter. So It's looking pretty good for me. I've been picking at it anytime I feel like I'm sick of summer knitting and fingering weight projects, I just pick this up. It's a nice worsted weight project. This is knit up in Sandnes Garn Pure Gint, there it is. It's knit up in Sandnes Garn Pure Gint in the colorway 9572, which I think is called olive green. Some call it deep green. Yeah, 9572 is the color. So it's like a slightly yellow toned pine green, essentially. I think, yeah, the color is kind of translating quite well on camera here. And I've been really obsessed with cable knitting, and I think I've seen typical Bliss also be obsessed with cables to the point where she's like knitting up cable jumper, self-drafted, and like it's kind of inspiring me to maybe do the same. Although I feel like I shouldn't get too ahead of myself. I should at least finish this first before I even think about, you know, a second one. But I've already started looking at my like Ravelry. I've already created like a Ravelry wish list of cable knit patterns if I don't want to self-draft and just follow another pattern. Now, when we think about cables, I feel like a lot of the knitting community thinks Sari Nordland. So maybe I've never tried any of her patterns, so maybe this will be a good occasion to try one of her iconic, you know, cable jumper patterns. So very excited for that. So I'm gonna just keep chipping away at this. Probably won't see a finished version of this until the very end of summer, if even. So yeah, this will be a long one, basically. So I'm also wanted to mention that, yeah, the PhD vest. So I'll insert a picture here. In the previous podcast episode, I mentioned that I was opening applications for test knitters to test my PhD vest pattern. And since then, we've successfully started the test knit. I have a wonderful group of knitters who are test knitting my pattern, which is so exciting because it's my first ever pattern release. And there was a fair bit of anxiety when I sent the link to the pattern to my testers, because I was like, oh my goodness, what if it's terrible? But so far the feedback's been very good, and I'm super, super grateful for all my testers. Actually, there's Jord Bear Knits, who is one of the testers, who talks about her version of the PhD vest. She's knitting up, and it's beautiful cobalt blue. So she's got a knitting podcast. So if you wanted to get a different perspective on the PhD vest, then go check out her knitting podcast. Now, so I'm supposed to knit a second sample of the vest, and I still haven't started it. So, did I have? No, I didn't have the yarn. So, okay, I'll mention the yarn. So, full disclosure, this yarn was sponsored by Market Town Yarns, in that I received this yarn for free in exchange for promoting Market Town Yarns. So I'm using their yarn as for the second sample of my PhD vest, and this is, I mean, first of all, super happy to be receiving yarn. I feel like I didn't expect to get to this point with my knitting social medias, and I've been using Market Town Yarns yarn subscription, as I mentioned earlier. So when they offered to, you know, sponsor me for the pattern release for the PhD vest, I was super happy to hear that. So this is their Market Town Yarns Squishy DK, which is a DK weight sock yarn technically. I believe the yarn content is 80% merino, 20% nylon. I'll check that. And this is in the colorway Stacy, which is this amazing, beautiful teal colorway. I have a sample, actually, hold on. So here is a little gauge swatch, and I did. So it's like, it's not variegated, it's a tonal yarn, which has, you know, a lot of dimension in it. It's super soft, super plump, really happy with it. And I met gauge with it. No problem, with the same needle size I used for the previous sample that I did in this color more yarn that I include here. So I made this gauge swatch a couple of weeks ago and I still haven't cast on because, you know, with the mixed rib camisole and the, what's it called, my partner's socks, I kind of put that to one side. And also there's been a massive heat wave, so I wasn't really feeling like knitting with, you know, quite plump DK yarn, even though I guess I had no problem knitting with this. So yeah, there's not much excuse. I need to get started on my second sample because quite a lot, sorry, I just dropped my gauge swatch. Quite a lot of test knitters are either done or nearly done with their vests, and I'm getting massive I feel like massive imposter syndrome for, you know, being the designer and yet still having not started the second sample while other test knitters are already done. And I usually share the test knitters' finished objects or like, you know, whips in my stories. So maybe if you follow me on Instagram, then you've seen me share the test knitters' finished vests, and it's so wonderful. People have done really interesting takes on this pretty simple pattern, really. I think the idea is like it's simple and it's also like a unisex pattern. So, you know, some people were talking about making a second one for their partners. I have had a request from a male friend to make a vest for him because he was like, I've been looking everywhere for vests like this and I couldn't find any in like shops or vintage shops. So I would love one for, knitted by you. And so people have been doing a lot of different color alterations. So they make the vests rib details in the different colors, or they make a striped version. Some people are even doing like second test knits, which is, you know, kind of reinforcing the fact that I really need to get started on my second sample. If my test knitters are doing a better job than me at knitting up this stuff, then I really need to get on with this. But yeah, so, you know, thank you very much, Market Town Yarns and the people at Yarnworks for sending me this yarn to knit up the second sample. It's going to be super nice. I'm really excited. I quite like the idea that I did the first one in like a very muted color, and this is much more of a statement color, so I have, you know, both to play with when I want to style my PhD vest. So that's like probably the most immediate plan to cast on in terms of what I will be doing in the next few weeks. And then the second plan I haven't even got the yarn for it. Probably going to pick it up when I'm in Oxford, as I mentioned. I'm going to be picking up some Sandnes Garn Double Sunday in the color Deep Red. I'll insert here, to make an Oslo hat for someone's birthday. I think, so basically this person went to Copenhagen with me because we're in the same research group, and he was wearing a red scarf against like a black coat and black jeans this whole time. We were saying how cool it was that the red scarf suited him really well against like he's also got black hair and like all the black clothes. It really suited the contrast. So he was saying, wouldn't it be so cool if like I also had a hat, red hat, and like red gloves or mittens? I think he actually already does have red mittens. So he was like, complete the look with a red hat. And that gave me the idea that since his birthday is coming up at the end of July, I could knit him a red Oslo hat. Now, Oslo hats are pretty quick to knit up. I've knit up 2 Oslo hats in the past, one for my partner and one for my partner's dad. So yeah, I know basically just to say that I know what I'm doing and I know how much time it takes. And I think between now and his birthday party at the end of July, I have enough time to be doing my Oslo hat and also, you know, still working on my PhD vest. So yeah, that's the plan. So it's like a future acquisition, so to speak. And last but not least, I've kind of tucked it away, so I don't really want to bring it down to talk about it, but I'll insert some pictures of what I got. I recently caved and got, I'm supposed to be on the Yarn Barn, by the way, but I caved because Yarnworks had some really good sales on some end of stock knitting folded merino. So I picked up 8 balls of their heavy merino in the colorway Brown Nougat, which is like a very pinkish brown. Now, I'm still having slight doubts about whether that brown will suit me, but I have a sweater quantity of it. Probably like a stockinette sweater quantity of it, because I was thinking, as I said earlier, cable jumper, wouldn't it be nice? I think heavy merino would suit it quite well, because heavy merino has a really nice plumpness. But I'm wondering, because cables are quite yarn thirsty, I think 8 balls of heavy merino for my size might not be enough. I was looking at one of the Sari Norden cable patterns called the Billy pullover, and I think for the size that I want to knit, I saw that most knitters used 1 or 2 balls more than what I have, so 9 or 10 balls. So I might have to pick up a couple more balls, which might not be the same dye lots and might not be exactly the same color, but I feel like I could get away with it by doing ribbed finishes with a different dye lot, if there is such a difference in the color. I heard that's like a good trick. If you have a couple of balls that don't quite match the balls that you already have, then you can use it for ribs, cuffs, you know, body ribbing or neck ribbing, to make sure that you already have a difference in texture, so the difference in color won't be as obvious, essentially. That's like the trick of the trade that I heard through watching many knitting podcasts. So yeah, so that was my acquisition, other than, you know, the sponsored yarn. Yeah, I caved and got discounted heavy merino. So I think this concludes my 5th knitting podcast. So it was like a general June roundup this time, and I think I'll stick to this monthly schedule. So the next podcast will be a July roundup and so forth. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. Make sure to follow my Instagram account and make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to my channel. If you've seen anything that you like, make sure to leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!